This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
If you're just joining the program, this is Boomer Life on CL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton. Thanks for being here today. We are talking about educating seniors in this province and empowering you with the right information and services that you need to make the most out of your retirement living years. In studio, we have Marlene Williams with us today. Marlene is the Executive Director of the BC Seniors Living Association. We also have Judy Carter with us, the General Manager of the Seniors Community Origin at Longwood in Nanaimo, and Jan Robson is with us today, the Provincial Education Coordinator with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. These are our three experts for today's show. So Marlene, just help me out with this a little bit. One of the reasons that we've brought everybody together today is because it's been brought to your attention. It's been identified in some of the seniors communities around the province that they're starting to notice the increasing age of residents and members of your seniors communities, and starting to notice some early signs of aging and dementia. Is this correct?
Yes. When I first joined the association, the average age in the communities was 83. Now it's 87, 86 to 87. So in 8 short years, the average age, so whether they're staying in their homes longer, or whether I'm not sure why they're coming in later in life, but so with that comes along, when they move in, they also have possibly a more decline in health, because their families or themselves may have realized they don't want to stay in their own residential home. So we, as part of our education program, I send out a survey to my members and I say, what's the number one challenge that you would like education on? And unequivocally, it came back and said, we need to start dealing with the early stages of dementia in our retirement communities, because whether it's assisted living or independent living, these seniors, this is their home. This is where they live now. And as they start to age, our owners and operators have to, need to, want to work with that resident to keep them healthy and active, and not make them move into long-term care, because they're attached to these and they don't want to move again either. And so we wanted to put some workshops together, and so it was just a natural to partner with Alzheimer's to say, put some workshops together for us and to teach our communities a framework, I think is what Jan called it earlier, the framework of how you and your staff and your residences can, and the families work together.
And how can everybody benefit? So Judy,
absolutely.
Coming from Origin at Longwood, have you noticed this in your community as well?
Absolutely. As Marlene said, the age of entry is a lot later. And so, and a lot of times, by the time people decide that they should come into our community, I think they're probably in perhaps the mid stage of dementia. Not even early. They've passed the early, because, of course, they've been able to manage on their own in the early stages in their own homes. So by the time they get to us, we're now looking at a more advanced stage of dementia, and that's what we have to live with until we move on to a further decline.
And so, Jan, on behalf of the Alzheimer's Society, I guess this is very timely because you have a strong initiative to help create dementia-friendly communities, not only in this province, but across the nation. So tell us how you fit into this picture.
Okay, well, one of my main roles with the Alzheimer's Society is to educate healthcare providers. And we provide a workshop that we see as being very foundational. We're calling it Building a Strong Foundation for Dementia Care. Because what we've found over the last few years is there really is a lack of basic information. We're not talking about how to do lifts and care in that respect. We're talking about understanding dementia, understanding how to communicate with a person with dementia, understanding the person's behavior as a form of communication.
And reacting properly.
And reacting properly, reacting as well as possible, facilitating communication. Okay. And it starts with that basic understanding, because we've been finding, doing these workshops over the last few years, that we're getting people who have been on average doing this kind of work for over 11 years, and yet there's some basic information they don't have. And so for whatever reason, the hunger is there, I think, at this point on the part of so many staff to just kind of, I need to know this, and I need to know what's happening.
So could you
and
give
that's
us
encouraging?
Absolutely encouraging.
For sure.
Can you give us an example about how simplistic this really is? But and I think, speaking for myself and maybe some friends or some of our listeners, we might think, oh, this is just common sense. Shouldn't you just apply common sense if you're dealing with somebody or helping somebody who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia? It's not always common sense.
In fact, a lot of times it's not common sense, because one of the first areas often to be affected in the brain when we're talking Alzheimer's disease is the area that's responsible for reasoning and logic. And so that's exactly where you're going to find common sense, is reasoning and logic. And so things like the repetition that happens, often people find that very difficult. The person with dementia asking the person over and over and over the same question, or telling the same story over and over and over. And it's taxing on the people around them. It's frustrating. And often there's that tendency to get very short with them. Listen to me. Listen when I told you the first. Don't you remember? I've already told you 5 times. And in fact, they don't remember, because every time they ask it, or every time they tell that story, to them, it's the first time. What's happening in the person's brain is his brain cells are dying. And some of those connections that they need for this information to get through, they're withering. And the person needs, the information needs to find detours. And that's taking time, and their short-term memory is often one of the first things to be affected by this. That's a general comment, because it depends on the type of dementia, it depends on the person, but short-term memory often is one of the first things that twigs for people.
Well, I think this would be good to clarify now. How do you define Alzheimer's or dementia, and are they one of the same?
I guess bottom line, if you have Alzheimer's disease, you have dementia. If you have dementia, it's not necessarily Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is the umbrella term, and it really is the term for those conglomeration of symptoms that we refer to with Alzheimer's disease and the other dementias. Commonly, problems with cognition, problems with motivation, changes in personality, that kind of thing, learning problems. That's dementia. And there's several kinds. Alzheimer's disease is the most common, responsible for somewhere around about 65% of all of the progressive dementias. There's vascular dementia, that's probably 15 to 20%, which is caused by stroke activity, big stroke activity, mini stroke activity. Frontotemporal dementia, more localized initially, and often younger people. It often will show up in younger people. Lewy body dementia, and we've heard more about that recently with the recent passing of Robin Williams, and so that's brought Lewy body dementia to the forefront. And it's almost a combination, if you want, of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, the way it presents. With the memory issues, you'll have the tremors, rigidity of Alzheimer's disease, often terrifying hallucinations for the person as well. These are just a few. They cause brain damage, they cause the loss of brain cells, and that's responsible for that collective term of dementia.
So let's do a little bit of an Alzheimer's and dementia 101 here. If you could give us some basics of early signs that we might be able to look out for, and I'm sure these are the type of things you would incorporate into your workshops to take into the workplace of BC senior living communities. So if you just start us off here with a little bit of some of the early warning signs that we might look out for.
And I just want to preface this, though, by saying that you could put a tick mark beside everything that I'm saying right now, and it still wouldn't necessarily be Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
You know, people will see online tools, and they'll go through them, and typically if they see a test online, it will say, you know, depending on the results of this, see your healthcare professional. Often people don't. They get the results and then they're very scared, and they don't see their healthcare professional. There are all sorts of things that, particularly in the early stages, look an awful lot like Alzheimer's disease and the other dementias. And so it's really important, if you are concerned, that you see your healthcare provider. You could be dealing with medication interactions, serious infection, depression, thyroid problems, brain tumor, the list goes on. That could be causing these problems.
So don't panic.
Don't panic. That's right. Having said that, short-term memory, problems with short-term memory, particularly with Alzheimer's disease, is one of the first signs. Also, though, important to remember that some memory changes are very normal as you age. And so it's that the difference between normal memory problems and problems that might in fact be significant that is hard for people. Also keeping in mind that we're talking about difference change. So if you've been a person who's had a really, really bad memory all your life and you're 75 years old and you have the same really, really, really bad memory, maybe just a little bit worse to account for your age, you probably don't have to worry about it at that point.
That's good.
So problems with memory, losing things. Now everybody loses things, everybody. But often what happens with Alzheimer's disease is when and if the object is found, it might be found in a place that nobody would ever have considered. The keys are tucked into the sugar bowl. The wallet is in behind the frozen peas in the freezer. So that kind of thing where it's not logical, it doesn't make sense. There'll be confusion, disorientation around time and place. The person may go to a place that they have been to numerous times in their life, and they walk out of the door, they walk out of their local Safeway, and they don't know where to go, and they don't remember if they brought their car, and they're petrified. And so something like that, there's often a confusion in terms of day-night. So the person tends to be sleeping more during the day, up half the night.
Yep.
Problems with initiation, with motivation. So it's very difficult to light a fire under the person to get them to do things that they often like to do very much before. Language difficulties. And again, we have some of those difficulties often as we get older. That tip of the tongue syndrome where you're, I can't remember the name. I know it starts with P.
That actor in
that movie,
yeah,
it's driving me crazy. And then what typically happens in those situations is 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days later, you're walking along and
3 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, the name or the word comes to you.
Yes.
With Alzheimer's disease, it generally doesn't. And you'll have a situation often where common words are elusive for the person, and they seem to be often, as if they're reaching for words that just aren't there. Gradually, what you might find is that some of if English is not their first language, some of their language is interspersed a bit with words from their first language as well, which confuses the issue. They may have problems identifying objects. So it might be, if I'm looking at my water glass, I might be, that thing that I put my water in, as opposed to my glass. So that might be an issue that they're having with language.
You've painted an excellent picture here. Is there any connection, because we've heard about it in the media recently, but a connection with Alzheimer's or hearing loss?
And that's certainly being studied, and it's a difficult one because part of the problem is if you can't hear, you're not getting the information. You're probably looking at somebody with kind of a blank look when they're talking to you, which can be very common when you're not following conversation, even when you do hear. So it certainly is being looked at. But if as far as it being a causal thing, I couldn't comment on that at this point.
So how important is this marriage here, this relationship building between the Alzheimer's Society and BC Seniors Living? I'm surprised it's just sort of coming about now.
Well, it's coming about because up until recently, as soon as someone showed the first signs of dementia, they were moved right into long-term care. And in the last couple of years, especially since the Seniors Advocate has done her reports and her studies, and she's come back and said that probably 15% of the people in the long-term care system should not be there. They could easily be in assisted living, and a lot of those people were. Some of them had extra prescribed services like therapeutic diets and such, but a lot of them were the early stages of dementia. They were happy, they were healthy, they were active, they were everything, but they just had short-term memory loss, or maybe they wandered a little bit or something. And so I think it's come to the forefront a little bit more so in the last couple of years. It may have well been in our communities for many years, but it's really just come to light in the last couple of years. And so the association, we believe that our environment of a community, which is the communal community of safety, security, and activity, is a better place, a happier place for a loved one to be, as long as they're not at risk of themselves or the other members within the community. And so I think it's important for our members who are dealing with the issues already. We're just trying to help them deal with them a little better and to help educate their staff.
Well, I know you have a couple of workshops on the agenda, and we're going to have that conversation next. You're listening to Boomer Life on CL 650, and joining us in the studio today from BC Seniors Living Association, Executive Director Marlene Williams, along with Judy Carter, General Manager from Origin at Longwood in Nanaimo, and Jan Robson is here, the Provincial Education Coordinator from Alzheimer's Society of BC. If you want more information, please visit the website, bcsla.ca. If you want information about the Alzheimer's Society, you can go to their website as well. It's alzheimersbc.org. This conversation, very specific to how retirement communities deal with dementia and what's being done about it in this province. It's all coming up next on Boomer Life on CL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.